This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benneroff, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world, and all you weather watchers out there. We know who you are. And we'll have a special presidential weather report later in the show with Peter Katz. So, hang on. Here are the headlines. John Bailey. Jim Benneroff is on assignment this week. The mayor sketches a rosy outlook for the city. Other cities are chasing us, he says. Common Council passes 2017-18 $189 million budget 5-2. City sales tax dollars are 0.5% lower after 10 months than last year. New buildings will bring sales tax numbers back thanks to restaurants and service businesses. City hopes. City gives 1.25% raises to appointed positions, 2% to mayor's staff. All unions under contract for 1 year until 2018. Elizabeth Schallenberger, recently approved for the city court judgeship, is relieved of all her cases due to a personal issue. She still remains on the court, no date set for return. This week we will have Donald in the Weather, another edition of Trump the President with Peter Katz. Senator George Latimer blasts Trump's decision on climate change, asks for the Astorino position. Chappaqua teacher admitting sexual abuse of minor students, sentenced to probation and sex offender status and loss of New York State teaching license. The White Plains Outdoor Arts Festival fills Tibbetts Park this weekend, June 3rd to 4th, and the Great White Plains Criterion Bicycle Race is Sunday. And now to the Rollo Newsreel March of Time. And that was the scene in Mamaroneck Harbor just yesterday when we were watching a boat being lowered into the water as summer has returned finally after a rather cold and wet May. And the scene on Monday evening in the Common Council was the proposed budget being adapted. There is a picture of Mayor Roach as he appeared on the government channel, and I heartily encourage you to watch this because it says how the city is thinking about where it is going. And here is one council, and here is the budget. The budget is $189 million. It delivers a 1.7% change in the tax rate, and it gives you a property tax of just $5 a month for the average home. That's $60 a year. And it preserves most services. It also
I'd like it if my property tax were only $60 a year. You mean property tax increase, I
property
assume.
tax increase for the average home, which is quite lower than the median home. So, and now Mr. Kirkpatrick talked about that and discussing the budget. Here is Councilman John Kirkpatrick.
We are, in fact, looking ahead. This mayor and this council have been for some time working on a vision for this city that makes a great deal of sense, and this budget backs it up. There's concern, of course, about sales tax. But the thing that we're doing here in White Plains is looking ahead for those changes that people are making in their daily lives. Granted, they're not going out and shopping for things as much as they used to, but there's a huge increase in the amount of money that people are willing to spend on restaurants, on services, and on entertainment. And that is exactly what we have been building in our downtown. This means we need to make a more attractive city. We're doing that. The fountains are a perfect example, but the level of development that we're bringing into the city is an even better. The fountains are a perfect example, but the level of development that we're bringing into the city is an even better example of the attractiveness that we're building. I hear it every day from people around the county, especially other cities. They wish they were White Plains. They were so jealous. We are doing well, we can do better, and we're going to keep working on it.
And then the mayor, at the conclusion of the budget vote, had this to say about our new bond rating and how good the budget is and why the plan is going to work.
Moody's has just reviewed for a bond issue and gave, once again, AA1 stable. When I became mayor, we were AA1 negative outlook. We are now AA1 stable. I want to thank our budget department, our finance department, our council members, particularly the councilwoman Smeda, for all her work in that regard. But it's something we're very proud of because we are running a fiscally prudent ship. That requires planning and looking into the future, and that is why for years we have been working toward bringing more residential into our downtown. Other cities are now catching on and trying to catch up, but we are ahead in that race. That is what you need to do in order to maintain your downtown, in order to maintain your sales tax revenues, because I don't think there's a person watching this show right now who thinks that this show. I'm looking at a TV camera. I don't think there's a person watching at home on television or on the internet who doesn't recognize there's been a shift in retail purchasing. Every day when I get home to my house, not only do I check the mailbox, I check the front stoop because there's always boxes on my front stoop. Between all the different members of the family with their phones, they can order whatever they want, and it appears on the front stoop. I was in Washington lobbying for changes to the law that would require online sellers to collect sales tax, but until that happens, this is going to have a big impact.
And it is having a big impact too, because commissioners are getting raises, and the raises are about 1.4%, and the mayor's office is staff of about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're getting an increase of 2%, and that's some of the salaries changed. The red figures are the new salaries for these various positions. And what I did after adding all this up, I found that there are 28 management positions, 4,154,000 payroll for the appointed positions, and the average salary is 148,358. Now, speaking of sales taxes, if we can go to the sales tax, that was soft again in April. The city sales tax is down 0.5%. We have 2 months left in the fiscal year. 41 million in the till in 16-17. At this point, 49.4 million so far last year in 2015 and 16. So we're about 8 million down. And if we continue getting what we got last year, we will be about $1 million down. Now, it has been erratic the last 5 years. There you see the figures to show that in 2011-12, we were at just about 51 million. We got up over almost to 52 million 2 years ago, but now we are slightly falling behind again, this even with the inflation. Westchester County, for the year so far, is up 0.5% after 4 months. Now, we go to the shocker of the week, and that was a order by the Chief Administrative Judge of the Courts of New York, Honorable Lawrence K. Marks, shown up to the left, and he issued an order on May the 2nd, which effective immediately, cases before Honorable Elizabeth Schallenberger, the city court judge of the city of White Plains, shall be reassigned to such other judge or judges as the Honorable Michael V. Kokoma, Deputy Chief Administrative Judge of the courts outside the city of New York, or his designee shall direct, and no additional judicial matters shall be assigned to Judge Schallenberger until further order of the Deputy Chief Administrative Judge. I talked to Lucian Chalfin, who is a press spokesman for Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals, Janet DiFiore, and he said that at the present time, Ms. Schallenberger continues on the bench, and she has been told to stay at home until she handles whatever is the matter. So we wish her well. But that is a shock, and people are wondering what's going to happen next with that. And again, we wish her well. And of course, there was a shock yesterday. Peter, do you want to tell us about it?
Well, as we're recording this program this morning, it is Friday morning. Yesterday, Thursday, there was a major event. And today, the big story around the world is what happened yesterday. And what happened was that President Trump, as anticipated in some quarters, removed the United States from participation in what's called the Paris Agreement relating to dealing with climate change. Now, some say that what he really did here was to remove the United States from the world community, and the isolationists, the nationalists, the Steve Bannon faction at the White House won this round. What happened was that the United States now joins Nicaragua and Syria, the only two countries in the entire world declining to participate in the Paris Agreement. Here in White Plains, there was reaction from Mayor Roach, who said that if the president won't lead, we will. As long as I'm mayor, White Plains is going to honor the goals of the Paris Accord. We're going to keep installing new electric vehicle charging stations. We're going to keep expanding recycling options and make it easier to install solar panels. We're going to keep moving away from the dirtiest fuel oils to cleaner alternatives. We're going to keep making our city's buildings more energy efficient and replacing streetlights with LED alternatives. In short, we're going to keep our commitment to the environment no matter what. Senator Chuck Schumer said the decision to withdraw is a monumental mistake. We will pay for this for generations to come. In response to the Trump decision, Governor Andrew Cuomo, California Governor Edmund Brown, and Washington State Governor Jay Inslee announced the formation of the United States Climate Alliance, a coalition that will convene the states on their own without the help of the federal government to uphold the Paris Climate Agreement. This takes aggressive action on climate change despite the Trump administration. And just yesterday afternoon, Cuomo signed an executive order which codifies actions that they will be taking in Albany to deal with climate change. Elon Musk, who runs the Tesla automobile company and SpaceX, says that he is going to quit 2 Trump advisory councils he sits on as a result of this. One is an economic advisory board, and the other is the Manufacturing Jobs Initiative. Robert Iger, CEO of Disney, has also quit Trump boards that he is on. 25 or so major corporations took out a full-page ad in the New York Times excoriating the president's decision. Trump made the announcement in a speech in the White House Rose Garden yesterday, Thursday, attended by a select group of Trump supporters and top White House officials. Now, the withdrawal process itself will take a couple of years to get out of the Paris Accord. The speech reverted to the dark rhetoric about the state of American society and its economy, which Trump used to win support during the campaign. It also used false statistics from a right-wing think tank and misrepresented the nature of the Paris Agreement, which does not impose mandatory pollution limits or financial obligations. The New York Times, I understand, is working on a story to be published fact-checking what Trump said. The agreement does establish worldwide cooperation and sets goals and suggested mechanisms to achieve them. The U.S. withdrawal now makes China the world leader in fighting pollution and promoting alternative energy sources. Trump mentioned Pittsburgh in the speech, and the mayor of Pittsburgh, Bill Peduto, last night reminded everyone that Hillary won Pittsburgh, and his city will follow what the Paris Agreement says, even though the U.S. is out of it.
I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. I promised I would exit or renegotiate any deal which fails to serve America's interests. America is $20 trillion in debt. Cash-strapped cities cannot hire enough police officers or fix vital infrastructure. Millions of our citizens are out of work, and yet, under the Paris Accord, billions of dollars that ought to be invested right here in America will be sent to the very countries that have taken our factories and our jobs away from us. So think of that. Our withdrawal from the agreement represents a reassertion of America's sovereignty. Staying in the agreement could also pose serious obstacles for the United States as we begin the process of unlocking the restrictions on America's abundant energy reserves, which we have started very strongly. It would once have been unthinkable that an international agreement could prevent the United States from conducting its own domestic economic affairs. But this is the new reality we face if we do not leave the agreement, or if we do not negotiate a far better deal. The risks grow as historically these agreements only tend to become more and more ambitious over time. In other words, the Paris framework is just a starting point, as bad as it is, not an end point. And exiting the agreement protects the United States from future intrusions on the United States' sovereignty.
Now, here in Westchester, State Senator George Latimer, who is running on the Democratic ticket for county executive, put out a statement saying, where's the county executive on the Paris pullout? The county executive, as you know, called for an environmental study before the Indian Point nuclear power plant can be closed. So the thinking on the part of the Latimer team is, if Rob Astorino is such an environmentalist, where does he stand on the pullout of the Paris Agreement?
He's straddling it.
There is speculation, and I emphasize the word speculation, but based on the information we have now, a possible explanation of what the Jared Kushner meetings with the Russian ambassador and head of a Russian bank are all about is that they're about changing U.S. government policy in order to enrich Kushner and other members of the Trump family and Trump's extended family. The payback for the Russians helping put Trump into office may be elimination of the sanctions imposed by the U.S. against the Russians for their meddling in the election. Among other things, the sanctions make it illegal for a Russian state bank to operate in the U.S. Now, Kushner, it turns out, met with the head of that Russian state bank. Rolling back the sanctions would allow that Russian bank to lend Kushner the money he can't borrow elsewhere to bail out some financially troubled real estate he has. Hum hum. The Trump administration is reportedly trying to give back to the Russians 2 estates, one near Washington, the other on Long Island, which were seized by the U.S. in retaliation for the Russian interference in the election. They had been used, among other things, by Russian spies. The Trump administration is drafting an administrative rule that would deny contraception health insurance coverage to approximately 55 million women. The rule would go into effect as soon as it is published in the Federal Register. It appears that if the latest reports are accurate, we have a U.S. Attorney General who is at the very least a liar and at the very worst a perjurer and felon. You may remember that Attorney General Jeff Sessions denied under oath to the Senate Judiciary Committee that he had met with the Russian ambassador. A few weeks later, when it was revealed that he did meet with the Russian ambassador, he was allowed to change the answer he gave under oath. But at that time of changing his answer, he failed to disclose that he actually had at least one more and possibly 2 more meetings with that same Russian ambassador. And there were witnesses who saw this, and at least one of them took place at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington. Sessions' failure to disclose these meetings on his security clearance is a felony.
Excuse me, wasn't the Mayflower Hotel the Watergate site? Or am I mistaken?
No,
it was not the Mayflower.
The Mayflower Hotel is
I thought
the
I had an
Mayflower.
intriguing parallel.
Fired FBI Chief James Comey will testify this coming Thursday under oath in public session before the Senate Intelligence Committee. It is widely expected he will not tell everything he knows, having been cleared to testify by the Russian Investigations Special Counsel Robert Mueller. President Trump will not move to relocate the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, at least not for now, reversing a campaign promise he made to some of his most conservative supporters. The White House disclosed Wednesday that it has granted ethics waivers to 17 people who work for President Trump and Vice President Pence, including 4 former lobbyists. Remember that business about draining the swamp and getting rid of lobbyists? An investigation by the Washington Post reveals that the Trump golf links at Ferry Point Park in the Bronx, right next to the Whitestone Bridge, which opened in 2015, has seen a 12% decrease in revenue since the campaign transition and Trump's inauguration.
Wow.
Trump's inauguration was very much on the minds of people up in Chappaqua who went to the Memorial Day parade on Monday. Hillary Clinton marched in the Chappaqua Memorial Day parade. She was wearing white and blue, and her sneakers were decorated with stars and stripes. She was with Bill Clinton and Governor Andrew Cuomo, and in some pictures you can see White Plains Assemblyman David Buchwald in close proximity to her. When it got too drizzly, they all retreated under American flag umbrellas. Hillary took to Twitter to let everyone know that it was, quote, a rainy but wonderful morning march in the Chappaqua Memorial Day Parade, and she was thinking of our veterans who gave their lives for this country. Although the crowds at times were sparse, Clinton's and Cuomo all waved to the onlookers, and even though there was plenty of cloud cover, Hillary wore blue reflective sunglasses. You know, there was a lot of Twitter news made this week. One of the things happened at just after midnight when President Trump took to his Twitter account, and look at this. This is what he sent out. Despite the constant negative press, Kofifi.
Is that French?
No one really knows what Kofifi
Coverage,
means.
I think, is what he meant to say.
No one,
Right.
no one could be reached at the White House to explain what
I mean,
this was all
Donald doesn't
about.
answer the phone late at night when...
Just after 6 a.m., Trump deleted the Kofifi tweet and said, "Who can figure out the true meaning of Kofifi?"
Master of deflection.
White House spokesman Sean Spicer addressed the late-night Twitter post during an off-camera briefing at the White House on Wednesday. He said, "The president and a small group of people know exactly what he meant." but he couldn't explain to newsmen what he meant. Now,
Well, that was really an important question to ask, wasn't it?
Hillary Clinton, who had a speaking address, a public appearance Wednesday out in California, said she thought it was a hidden message to the Russians.
Oh my goodness! Right.
Yeah.
Well, what did she get paid for that speech, by the way? If she did get paid, Any idea?
I don't know, but she made quite a bit of news. She did talk about the election results, and she said that at some point she has to take responsibility for every decision that she made in the election. Which
I'm
is a
really
rather,
glad she recognized
rather adult
that.
thing to say.
Yes.
When President Trump saw the news coverage that her appearance out in California had gotten and heard some of what she said, he took to Twitter. And he said, "Crooked Hillary now blames everybody but herself," which she didn't. She accepted blame. Refuses to say she was a terrible candidate. Hits Facebook and even Dems and DNC. And Hillary replied, quote, "People who live in Kofifi houses shouldn't throw Kofifi."
And adding another interpretation. But anyway, I just want to assure you folks that at the present time, as we speak, there are 1,315 days to go in the first term of the Trump presidency.
We have some good news here in White Plains. State Assemblyman Buchwald and State Senator George Latimer have announced that over $400,000 in construction grants are being awarded to various libraries in White Plains, in Westchester, and White Plains is one of them. The White Plains will get about $100,000 to to use in construction work at the library. This construction grant helps fund a reinvention of this grand library, creating the hub for adults, a new community room, new classrooms, expanded technology, and even a cafe, said White Plains Library Director Brian Kenny.
A wonderful thing, really. And a couple of notes in journalism. It was announced this week that the New York Times has relieved their public, the person who was handling the public advocacy position on the editorial page. They're completely revamping that, and this was the person that investigated Times stories and to see if they were accurate.
I heard, actually, I had a story that the Times, not only is their circulation dramatically up as a result of all of the Trump news, but they're actually hiring people once again instead of firing people.
Well,
more journalists finding journalism work.
Right, and there's also a story put out by ACT group that points out that MSNBC is hiring conservative commentators such as Nicole Wallace, George Will, Hugh Hewitt, and of course Megyn Kelly and Greta Van Susteren, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah,
anyway,
many of those folks, they're not becoming anchor persons. They won't have their own shows, but they do make various appearances from time to time.
Now, don't forget the White Plains Arts Festival this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. It's a great event. Looks like weather is going to be good. And John Bailey, Peter Katz, good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week. News and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.